Boatworks today is sponsored by Total Boat and Alexial Yacht Coatings, as well as supported by the generosity from the beautiful folks over on Patreon. Thank you so much. So welcome back, everybody. Hope you're doing well. My name is Andy with Boatworks today, and this week we're going to be talking about working with epoxy, specifically when you're working with large batches of epoxy, and little tips and tricks that you can use to help it avoid from setting up on you too fast and wasting a bunch of money. And oh yeah, then we're going to get this coring in place. You know, the Coosa on the transom. Let's get started. So first things first, as long as this Coosa is sitting here, right now this is just kind of dry fit. There is no epoxy, it's just basically set in place. But as long as it's here, I want to try and figure out how I'm actually going to be able to, create some pressure on these panels to actually hold them in place while the epoxy cures, once we get to that step. Now, there's typically a couple different ways that you can approach this. Normally in the past, which I'm not going to be able to do on this project because I have on the back side of this transom is the Armstrong bracket, so I don't have an open face on the transom to be able to do this. But typically what I suggest people do is basically through bolt it. So dry fit everything, drill in your holes, depending on how large the area is, maybe like a bolt every foot and a half, give or take. And do that while it's dry fit, and then come time when you've got everything loaded up with epoxy, you can set it back in place, and then you can use those holes to kind of realign things and run your bolts, through bolt them, tighten them up. You can sandwich everything together and boom, that works out very, very well. Now, since I can't do that on this project, I need to figure out a way to basically create some bracing. So what I think I'm gonna end up doing is running some bracing, say from here over to here, in probably 5 or 6 different areas. Now, this is kind of an important step because with what we're working with here, this is roughly, with the 2 layers of Coosa that I've used so far, there's probably around $400 worth of material just in the coring. And then with all the epoxy I'm gonna be laying up to get these laminated to each other as well as to the transom, that's probably going to be around another $200-ish, so around $600 worth of material that we're going to be working with here. Last thing I want to do is f this up, all right? So I'm going to be very, very careful. I'm going to map everything out, have everything numbered as far as exactly where it goes, and basically go through start to finish. Take it all apart, set it back in place, do some dry runs, so that come time when the epoxy is in place, I'm not scrambling around trying to figure out what do I got to do next? I want everything to go off like clockwork. So I think that's kind of the approach I'm going to take here. So first things first, let me get some bracings cut and kind of start getting this, cut. So this is what I came up with. As you can see, I've got, a total of 5 braces. I also have some little guys down there in the corner. And just to make sure I don't screw anything up when I'm trying to hurry and get everything back in place, I also came in and numbered each of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 down there on the bottom. So the pressure on here across the panel, it seems to be pretty consistent. I tried pushing around on the corners and everywhere that one of these braces is not touching, and I'm not getting any flex. So I think I got pretty even pressure, all the way across side to side and as well as top to bottom. So at this point, what I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull all these braces out, get the Coosa panels pulled out, set aside, and then clean up the surface. Basically go over it with like a surface cleaner and de-waxer, make sure everything is prepped and ready to go. And then it's time to start mixing up some mud. Well, not mud, but thickened epoxy. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be bonding these panels in place using epoxy, specifically the Total Boats. They're 2-to-1 with their slow hardener. Now, I know this is going to be a question that's going to come up, and it's going to be, well, if I wanted to, could I use polyester resin, and thicken that up and use that for bonding these panels in place? And I guess the simple answer is yes, you could. Personally, I don't. The main reason is there are a few situations where epoxy really, really shines. And when you're talking about bonding something, from one surface to another, epoxy kind of really holds the trophy in that category. So that's why I want to use this. Also, I want to use the epoxy for the extended working time. As you know, I mean, it's what, 65, maybe 68 in here. If I were to mix up a large batch of polyester resin, thicken it up, I suspect it would start to kind of gel before I actually had it smoothed over the panel and stuck in place. The main difference being here, say with epoxy, by the time this is all spread out thin, which I'm going to touch more on that here in a second, by the time this is spread out thin, I'll probably have 25-ish minutes of working time before it starts to kind of tighten up on me. In these temperatures, compare that to using with like a thickened polyester-based resin, probably a third of that time. I'd probably have 10 minutes, if that. So those are the two main reasons I'm going with epoxy. Now, because I want this layup process to go as smoothly as possible, I'm going to pre-mix, I'm going to start with 2 large containers of the thickened epoxy. Now, it's not going to have any hardener in it. What I'm going to end up doing then is I'm going to basically pour off all the resin. I'm going to thicken this to about half of the consistency that I'm looking for, which is going to be, when it's all said and done, about ketchup consistency. So I'm going to thicken it about halfway just to give me a little bit of a head start time-wise when it comes time to actually throw in the hardener and do the final thickening. Now, that's kind of a little bit of a touchy subject because when you read through some of the publications and information online, they say don't ever pre-thicken your resin before you add the hardener. They want you to add your resin, then your hardener, mix that up really, really well, then throw in your additives or your fillers. And that is good advice. I'm not going to argue against that. That's great advice. But as long as you don't thicken your resin batch too much, I mean, still, as long as it's still soupy, your hardener will still incorporate just fine. You may want to add another extra minute of stirring time after the hardener is mixed, but I've never, doing it this way, I've never run into any problems. So to start off with this, I'm gonna pour in, or basically 32 ounces in each of these containers, and then I'm gonna go ahead and then for the thickener, I'm gonna be using silica. So now at this point, I've got all day. Because I haven't added the hardener, I'm under absolutely no time restraints at this point. So once I actually add the hardener then, that's when the clock starts. Now, once I do that, I'm not going to have a whole lot of time to kind of, I guess, narrate and whatever. So get ready for a montage. But before I start that, I do want to go over kind of some of the details as far as what I'm going to be doing during this process. Now, once I add the hardener here, well, for adding the hardener, I'm going to be using a separate cup. Because I added the silica to this, it essentially kind of fluffed up this mixture. So when I'm looking on this container here, it no longer says 32 ounces. It's like almost 36 ounces. So if I were to actually use this to measure how much hardener I need to add, because I need to add 16 ounces of hardener because, well, it's 2-to-1, half of 32 is 16. Now, if I were to use this to add up 16 ounces, yeah, I could probably do it and just, add in that extra amount. But it's a lot safer to actually just use a clean cup, pour out your 16 ounces into this, dump it in there, mix it up, and you're ready to rock and roll. Now, as far as how I'm going to be spreading this, I'm going to be using a plastic trowel, and I'm going to try and spread this as evenly as I can across the face of the 1-inch panel. But I'm going to try and spread it so that it's roughly about an 1/8 inch thick, which is I think good. I know there's going to be some squeeze out, and that's perfectly fine. I guess in my mind, I would rather waste a few dollars in material, but know that I'm going to have a really, really good surface-to-surface contact and a really good bond. I would rather have that rather than try and save a few pennies and lay it on a little thinner and, well, run the risk of not having a good bond. This is one of those situations where less is not more, all right? So I think that's about it. Let me just make sure I've got everything squared away up on the top, ready to go. And yeah, so I'm going to be using this round on the 1-inch panel to kind of determine how much I'm going to need for the second panel, because remember we're doing a 1-inch piece of Coosa and then a 1/2-inch piece. So I'm going to use the same amount of material on each panel. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get away with just one of these on the 1-inch panel, or if I'm going to end up having to use both. I don't know. This is kind of a little bit of an experiment. Now, I just want to kind of, before I sign off on here, I just want to kind of say, now, if you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be doing a lot of layups, whether it's pre-thickened epoxy or just regular unthickened epoxy or polyester resin or whatever, if you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be having multiple layups, this is a really good way to kind of prep yourself or get things prepped so at least you're halfway ready to start laying up the next bucket. So now right here, once I lay this one up and I'm gone, all I gotta do is come down here, add the hardener, a little bit more silica, give it a quick mix, and I'm ready to roll. I don't have to pour anything out and measure anything. It's already set and ready to go. Now I know that between these two buckets, I'm gonna be able to get at least one panel done. Like I said, I'm hoping I'll be able to get one of these for the whole panel, but we'll see. I'm not gonna skim. So with that said, let me glove up and put my mask on. Double check up on the boat, and then I think we're ready to start getting greasy here. One thing I did forget to mention is after you've got your hardener mixed in here, you want to get it out of this bucket as quickly as possible. It's already starting to get a little warm. If this epoxy sits in this bucket as it is right now, it will be curing in about 5 minutes, if that long. So by spreading it out into a thin layer, you'll get more than, well, you'll quadruple your work time, if not more. Well, I give that about a 6 out of 10. Maybe a 7, probably closer to a 6. Let me show you what's going on. All right, well, I don't have a whole lot of time to sit here and talk about this, but yeah, I'd say it's just a little bit of squeeze out. All this pretty much oozed out while after I put the first panel in and while I was mixing up the second batch for the second panel. So at this point, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to come back with the squeegee, kind of scoop up as much as I can, and try and pack it in, down along the bottom there, wherever it'll fit. that's where it's going to get some love, and wherever it doesn't, well, it's going to go back into the bucket, and it's just going to end up being waste. But I do know that I got a good bond. That's what's important at the end of the day. So before this reaches over the corner here and gets close to the drain plug, I got to start cleaning. So I ended up cleaning out about, how much is that? About 16, 18 ounces of epoxy, and it's sitting in the bottom of this bucket now. Has not fully cured yet, but I'm getting ready to check out for the night. So if you're in this kind of situation, do not, and I repeat, do not leave a bucket with this much epoxy sitting in it laying down somewhere inside your shop, all right? Especially don't throw it in the garbage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it outside. It's about 30 degrees outside. I'm going to take it out, sit it on top of some gravel, and just let it do its thing overnight if it does anything. So that way, the cool weather is going to slow down any kind of curing process. It's not going to get any kind of excess heat buildup, and it's perfectly fine. But again, if you have a large volume of waste, don't leave it in your shop. Take it out, put it on a cement patio, some gravel, whatever. Just someplace where if it does actually catch for whatever reason, which is still rare, but it does happen, make sure that it's someplace that it can't catch something else larger on fire. But let me grab the little handheld. Let me show you how the cleanup went. All right, so I am going to have some sanding to do in the morning, but oh well. All in all, it's really not that bad. So with that said, I'm going to take this bucket, set it outside, and I'm going to check out for the night, and I'll see you back in the morning. It is the next day. Let's see how we did. I'd say that's about as solid as it gets. Sweet. So there's a little bit of cleanup that needs to get done along the bottom there, but overall, not too bad. Not bad at all. So there really isn't that much sanding that needs to get done here, so I think I'm just going to take care of that off camera. But then I think there's still one more thing we can get done yet this week. Well, thinking about it, I should have just snapped my fingers, but oh well. Now the last thing I want to do is, when you're looking around the perimeter here, there are some small gaps. Not bad. Actually, it's pretty good along the top and the sides, but down along the bottom, there's a little bit more of a gap, at least when you get out more towards the edges here. Specifically right in here. So the last thing I want to do before I kind of check out for the week is I want to mix up some more thickened epoxy. Now I'm going to be mixing this much thicker than what we did when we were laying in these Coosa panels. And main reason being is because when I actually pipe these into these seams, I don't want it flowing back out. So there's going to be quite a bit more silica going into this mix. Now, this is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to mix it up nice and thick and then put it into a Ziploc, zip top bag. I'm not sure how you're supposed to call that, but cut a corner off and then pipe it in and then smooth it over. All right, I'll take it back. I'll say when it's all said and done, I would give this install a good solid 8.5, maybe 9. Hell, a lot better than it was when it was a 6, right? But with that said, I think right here is going to be a good stopping point for this week, and I also think this video is probably going to be a little bit long. So, it is what it is, right? So as always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Thank you in advance. I really appreciate that. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to leave those down below. I'll do my best to get back with you. And as always, thank you for your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.
This has been a Boatworks Today production.